I actually moved to the Dominican Republic in the summer of 2020, and then in November, I married my husband, Mariano. He is Dominican, and I've been here for almost 3 years now. And in that time, we've had several visitors who have stayed with us. So if you're visiting the Dominican Republic, you can kind of get an idea of what things might cost. However, it very much depends on where you're coming, what city you're coming to. I am speaking to Santo Domingo, Juan, Dolio, San Pedro, La Romana, that area along the south of the Dominican Republic. And I'm going to be going over airport transportation costs, taxi and bus ride costs, restaurant/food/grocery store costs, and tipping as well. Kind of what is expected when it comes to tipping. All of which are generally paid for in cash. Although some places you can use a credit card.
Hello, hola, it's Yonny and Kayla. Hola, hello from the DR of Buffalo.
So first up is airport transportation. We live in San Pedro, and there are 2 airports, one in Santo Domingo and one in Punta Cana. The airport in Santo Domingo is about 45 minutes to an hour away, and a taxi ride costs 2,500 pesos, but that is a private taxi service that we use. We know the drivers. There are 2 that we use, and we know both of the drivers, so it's 2,500 pesos. A normal taxi from the airport to San Pedro, an hour away, costs 6,000 pesos, which is way too much for us, way overpriced. However, I realize that probably is cheap compared to a lot of other taxis in the United States, so maybe you're okay with that. And then the taxi from San Pedro to Punta Cana, that is almost 2 hours away, and that ride is about 5,000 to 6,000 pesos because it's so far away. And again, that's with the private taxi service that we use, not just your normal taxi or airport shuttle or anything like that. That must be paid for in cash. However, the airport will rip you off when you're exchanging money, so I wouldn't recommend exchanging your money at the airport. There are exchange places. I don't know what they're called in English. They have them in San Pedro, they have them in Juan Dolio, they have them wherever. And it's much better to go to a smaller location to exchange your money, because then you're going to get the actual exchange rate and you're not going to get ripped off like at the airport. The next cost is for taxis. Now there are 2 kinds of taxis: moto taxis, which are motorcycles, and regular taxis, which are cars or vans or small trucks. So first is moto taxis. If you want to ride a moto, I would not recommend riding a moto taxi in the capital, because Mariano and I did that once, and the guy quite literally drove from the street to the curb, to the street, to the curb, to the street, cut in front of a bunch of cars to turn, and I will not do that again. But in San Pedro, that is how we get around. And in Juan Dolio, that is where we get around, is moto taxis, because it's the cheapest and the fastest. So a ride right now, it is 2023. The cost is 75 pesos for a ride for one person. If 2 people go on moto, then it's 75 pesos per person. And if you want the moto to wait for you somewhere, then it costs extra. So if I am going somewhere, I will just pay him and then he will leave. And then if I need another one, I'll just get another one, because they're literally everywhere. They drive by all the time, always. You can get a moto taxi very easily. And then the other option is to get an actual taxi. So in San Pedro, taxis are extremely expensive. If you want a 5-minute ride, it's $50. It's about 3,000 pesos. So we never use taxis within San Pedro. However, when we go visit the capital, Santo Domingo, we will use taxis to get around. But just know that if they see an American, they are going to ask you for a higher price. Taxis are generally 250 pesos to 300 pesos for a ride. So don't believe them, because they're going to tell you 800, they're going to tell you 1,000 pesos for a ride, which again is super cheap. However, that's not the price, and that's not what they would charge any Dominican, and that's only what they charge foreigners. And I've had that happen several times. When I went to the capital with my parents, the guy told me that it was 800 pesos for about a 10-minute ride, and he just assumed that we didn't know any better. And I was like, no, it's not 800 pesos. And they will tell you, oh, there's traffic. Oh, it's so far away. Oh, this reason or that reason. No. So when I was with my parents, I did get the price down to 500, but that's still overpriced. And then I went back recently with a friend of mine when she came, and I was able to get him down to 300. I wanted 250, but he said 300, and I was like, fine, I don't want to argue anymore. So whenever I go to the capital, I take a bus to the capital, but then within Santo Domingo, I'll take several taxis. So every trip probably will take about 3 to 4 taxis for the day. Another cost is for bus rides. When my friend came to visit last month, we went to Santo Domingo, we went to Juan Dolio, and we went to La Romana. And the bus ride for 2 of us for the whole week, 3 separate trips, was 900 pesos. So bus rides are very cheap. It is a very good option if you want to save money. And they're not going to rip you off like a moto taxi might or a taxi might. Buses are generally standard in how much they charge people. Okay, so tipping. First of all, everyone that I ask seems to have a different opinion about this topic. But basically, if you're at a restaurant, nobody really tips more than 500 pesos unless there's a large group of people. If you go to a grocery store and there's someone who puts the groceries in the plastic bags for you, you should tip them. However, the price ranges between 50 pesos and 100 pesos depending on who you ask, and everyone seems to have a different opinion about that. But 100 pesos is kind of a lot to tip the bagger. Usually it's 50 pesos or less for that. So basically tipping is not really expected, not at a restaurant. But if you're gonna be at a resort, those people live for tips and they expect tips. And Mariano and I have been asked directly for tips from people who worked at the hotel or at the resort. So tipping at a resort is different. The last cost is for food. So if you go to the grocery store, the prices of food are generally the same as in the United States. It's not going to be cheaper. It's going to be about the same. And certain things are more, like imported things, like if you want peanut butter or Nutella, or like baby wipes even, they are way overpriced, like $10, $15, $20 for each of those things. So certain things are very expensive, but for the most part, food prices are about the same as in the United States. However, now I'm not so sure about that because prices are going up. But for restaurants, if Mariano and I go to a restaurant in San Pedro, we'll spend 2,000 to 3,000 pesos at the most for us. If we go to Juan Dolio and we go to a restaurant on the beach that's a little bit nicer, that's going to be about 5,000 to 6,000 pesos if we're getting full meals and like smoothies or like cold drinks or something like that, then it's going to be more expensive. And then the capital, those restaurants, especially in the colonial zone, are more expensive in that area. However, there are cheaper restaurants that you can find. So yeah, those are some of the costs in the Dominican Republic. Again, it does depend on the city that you're coming to. When my friend came to visit, she brought $500 in cash with her to exchange, and she used that for 5 full days. So she spent about $100 in cash per day for everything, and she bought Mariano and I food as well, and that was enough for her. So I hope that gives you an idea of how much cash you might want to bring if you're coming, or how much you might need. If you've been here and you want to share anything about your experience, let us know. Otherwise, that's all. And so it begins. The airport in Santo Domingo will probably use about 3 to 4 taxis. I think he hears me talking. Maybe he's trying to communicate with me. Maybe he's hungry.
I'm doing fine. So is your worried mind. Sit back and close your eyes. Yeah, this land is a paradise. are so very nice. I'm happier than I've ever been in my whole